heading back over to the exercise side of things, you've already given us some parameters of what is safe, what is effective. You defined very well the difference between exercise and activity. Let's talk about the exercise portion of things, and what are some of the principles that you talk about when approaching exercise correctly?
Okay, so I am a big proponent and have been forever of what we call high intensity exercise. Right away, people go, I can't do high intensity exercise. I'm going to get hurt. I don't do it. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just starting. I don't want to be, Mr. or Miss America. I mean, okay, I got it. I understand. The reason I use the term high intensity exercise is because it is a scientific mechanical term. And all it means really at the bottom, most basic interpretation is working harder than you're used to. So if you don't do a damn thing, then walking around the block can be high intensity exercise. It's harder than you're used to. It's more demanding. And it all has to do with these different muscle fibers that we have. And I have a muscle fiber chart that I use in every talk. But we're trying to get to use, to a certain degree, the hardest working muscle fibers that we have. Now, I can take a 400-pound person who hasn't done any exercise in 30 years and have them do high intensity exercise. And right away, the doctors and the people, oh, you're going to kill him. He can't. He's not capable. If I have him sitting against the wall and bending his legs 10 degrees, which is coming down 6 inches with his back against the wall, and trying to hold that, within 20 to 30 seconds, I guarantee that person will have done high intensity exercise for his legs, meaning he has to call upon his most powerful energy utilizing muscle fibers, and he will fail. He will get tired enough he can't sustain it. That for him is high intensity exercise, okay? Somebody who has done nothing and walks around the block twice will become so fatigued because of a lack of conditioning that he will have to start to recruit his highest energy producing and power force producing muscle fibers. That's high intensity exercise, okay? Now, no amount of exercise that requires you to be in a steady state, in other words, it doesn't move the needle in energy, the rate of energy utilization and muscle fibers that now come into play to exert more power or effort. No amount of that steady state exercise, by definition, can produce the results that a high intensity stimulation of the muscle fibers can do. Okay, so and is it beneficial? Absolutely. That's great activity. That's what activity is for, is to recruit the lowest strata, the less energy demanding, less powerful muscle fibers that we all have. That's fine. I want you to do that, and I want you to do it every day. It's not overwhelming. It's not exhausting, and it's a very steady state, but it's also not as productive at all. It has a different chemical pathway induction. In other words, it makes different stuff happen in your body than recruiting those high intensity, what we call glycolytic or sugar burning muscle fibers. And that's really what we're trying to do. So my system is this: in as safe and efficient a manner as we can, I want to instigate what we call the threshold level, meaning a level at which your body is going to have to pay attention, okay, of all the major muscle groups in your body in the full range of motion a couple of times a week. And that whole process should take about 15 minutes. And that's what the book is about. That's how I train people. That's how I've trained myself for 60 some odd years. And it's very productive. It's absolutely, and people say, how can that be? 15 minutes sounds like a gimmick. Believe me, if you're working at a high intensity and you're working all these different muscle groups, 15 minutes is all that's required. Can you do more? Maybe a little. Can you do less? Probably a little. But I tell you what, you ain't going for like 35 minutes. If somebody tells me they did a high intensity workout and it took them an hour, I said, you didn't. Okay. If I ask you to sprint, you're not going a mile. It's that simple. So it's self-regulating, which is kind of beneficial behaviorally, because you can't do a lot of this very, very potent exercise because your body will self-regulate. It can't do it. And if you try to do more, all you're going to do is get tired, produce bad chemicals like what we call cortisol, bad enzymes, which now give you stress and inhibit the release of fat or energy. So, I mean, it's really self-regulating, and it's that simple. But what I do in the book and what I do in my lectures, and there's plenty of stuff. Unfortunately, there's so much stuff that it's um confusing. I mean, it's really that to me. People ask me, what's the hardest thing to do about diet and health programs, diet and exercise program? I said it's to find really legitimate information. There's so much information, and it sounds logical the way it's explained. You know, if it's too good to be true, it's probably true that it's not. It's BS. But 15 minutes is really you try it, and the most elite athlete I've ever trained can't go much more than that. And then it's not necessary for that requirement that the physiology of our bodies is looking for. Think about the developing primitive man. He had to move around. Remember I said 3.2 to 3.7 miles an hour. We did that for hours every day to want, we were tribes, we were nomads, we were looking for places to stay. Okay. But every once in a while, we had to bust our asses hunting, fishing, dragging, butchering. Okay. But we didn't do that every day, because if we had to do that every day, we would have ceased to be a species. We would have been exhausted and we would have been prey. So a couple times a week, more than likely, we had to go out and hunt and bust our chops really hard to exhaustion, and then to find our food. And then we ate, we took it easy, we walked around a little bit. When it's time to get more food, we had to go out and do it again. But we can't do that on a daily basis, because we can't recover optimally. It's just not necessary. More is not better. Harder is better. Harder, less frequently, for shorter durations.
Yeah, I love that. The way I'll kind of explain it to people is imagine like a teeter-totter, and on one side you have intensity, and on the other side you have frequency or volume, and you just can't have both. And most people think, oh, I'm going to get into this plan. I'm going to start with 2 days a week, and then I'm going to work up to 3 or 4 or 5 or 6.
Right.
And I'm only working out 30 minutes a day. I want to start working out 45 in an hour. I just need to build up to that. And it's actually like, no, over time you probably need to do less, because you want that intensity, and because you have the intensity, it's like you just said, then you cannot do it frequently. It's not possible. And most people kind of get that confused. And I also notice so many people push back against it. Like I'll ask somebody in the beginning of our conversation, like, would you like your plan to be very complicated and complex, or would you like your plan to be very simple and easy to do? And everybody throws up their hands and go, oh, I just need simple. Everything in my life is way too complex already. I need something simple. And in a few minutes, you can explain exactly what you've explained. Keep carbohydrates low, focus on fats and proteins. And with the exercise, you really want to challenge the muscles. Do a few of these different exercises, do them, what you recommend twice a week, 15 minutes. And people like hear that and they stop, and then they start like inventing ways to make it more complicated. Like, well, what about my cardio? It's like, well, I guess that's activity. You can add that in if you want. Well, what about these supplements and this meal plan and all these other things? And like, you are making it complicated. You said you wanted it simple. We gave you the simple thing. I end up getting a lot of pushback that way, because I think people believe that it has to be complicated because of what you said, an overload of information out there.
Yeah, I mean, what happens as a result of these simple behaviors that we're suggesting is very complicated. The chemistry is very complicated, and the nuance. I mean, there are certain subtleties that we want to include, but in the beginning, we're all looking for the lowest hanging fruit. Let's just, the Pareto principle, which Ivor Cummins introduced me to, says 20% of what we do gets us 80% of the benefit. So let's go there, and you can become anal, you can become crazy, you can listen to 15 different podcasts and basically vendors selling their supplement or their plan. That's cool, but it's self-serving. This is not self-serving. I couldn't, this, I'm telling you, this is what I do. This is what my family does. This is what my friends do. This is what people who come to me personally and I've been training and consulting with for like 30, 40 years, do. It's not something I made up to sell. If you knew anything about book sales, that, my books, when I go to the conferences, I sell for $10. Those books cost me with shipping $9. The only reason I charge 10 is because I don't feel like making change. Okay. So I don't make anything on the books. And the ones on Amazon, you make a couple bucks, but it's not like, you're going to live off that. I wrote that book to be simple, to be suggestive of something that most people can been handled in a palatable, behaviorally palatable manner. And that's fine. And there are other good books, absolutely. But when you, again, a very good point you made, Corey, when you start to say, well, I can do it better. Okay, remember this old saying, better is the enemy of good. All right. If you got a good plan, you're healthy, you feel good about it, it fits into your lifestyle, you're doing the things you're trying to do. It's not perfect, okay, but it's working.